I'm just scoring the edge of my base for my teapot before I add the walls. I have my wall here, and I have prepped the edges with this beveling tool to create the slant that I need to attach the two pieces together without having a hump. That's something I picked up from one of the videos I watched this week that I didn't have when I built cylinders with my students, and I think that would have really helped them. So I picked one of those up so we'd have it in the classroom. And now I'm just applying slip everywhere I'm going to make attachments. I am also scoring this beveled edge here and applying some slip to it as well, and then to the bottom of this. Actually, I should probably start to score that as well. I cut these slabs yesterday, and I left them uncovered for part of the day and then covered them when I left for home so that they would be stiff enough to use today. So I'm going to add this piece and get it all assembled and then let it set for a little bit before I try to do the other piece, and that works out well because this is before school starts in the morning, and hopefully by the time my conference period comes around this afternoon I can go ahead and start assembling the rest of it. And I had paper templates for all of this to make sure that it would fit correctly. I made the circle templates. I had different size plates, paper plates, and so I was able to use those, and then I cut some paper strips in order to make sure that they would fit around the base here. So this is a little dry right here. I'm going to go ahead and add some more slip. So I'm going to finish attaching this. I'm also going to put a coil for reinforcement here. Then I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll come back to do the top of the teapot. Also, I don't know if you can tell, but I have some texture that I printed in. I didn't try to make it real even because I just wanted this to be the background for all the details so that it wouldn't be plain. So I had some kind of like bumpy mats, and I had this kind of swirling roll, and so I've just used a combination of those in random places so that once I start adding the details, there'll be some kind of a background to them, so there's not going to be any like large blank areas that don't have anything behind them. I wanted to kind of get that feeling of depth of the coral reef. So we'll see how that works out. So I'm going to keep rolling this. I'm going to add it in here by scoring and slipping. So I have my coil made. It's about the width of a pencil, maybe slightly thinner, but that's about right. I'm going to come along and score all around this so that no matter what edge ends up against the pot, it'll be scored. And then I'm going to add some slip, and I'm going to put it in here and then smooth it in. Alright, so on my pot here, I've kind of pressed out the edges a little bit to make it more round. And then I've also rounded the seam here. This is actually the bottom of my teapot. So I'm trying to kind of give it a little bit of a roundness that's not normally afforded to it just simply by it being slab built. So the next thing I'm going to do is I have this template here that I have cut out and textured a little bit for the spout. So I'm going to turn this into a spout that I can attach, and then I also have another circle to make the top and cut out the lid from it. So those are the next steps. As you can see, there's some random texturing on this. Some of it's easier to see than others, but that's just really kind of like my base layer that I wanted to kind of give the background of my coral reef design some texture so it wouldn't have gaps of large gaps of unattended areas in between the different coral and seaweed and things like that that I'm going to add, because I really want it to have like a sense of depth that you get in the ocean. So that's where I am right now. So I'm going to start making this shape here into the form of the spout for the tea kettle. I'll probably shorten it because I don't think I want it this long, but I cut it longer than I thought I would need it so that I would have plenty of clay to play around with and edit down if I decided I wanted it larger or smaller. Alright, I'm getting ready to attach the top, so the first thing I'm going to do is score all of this area, and then I'm going to use some of my extra clay here to make a coil that will go on the inside and just thicken the width of the attachable area. And then once I've done that, I can score and slip the edges of my lid piece to attach that. And I'm not being too picky about a pretty coil here. It's just a real thin coil just to expand that area a little bit so that my lid will be easier to attach. So I'm going to add some slip here. This is pretty hard now, so it's going to be really important that I score and slip everything really well. I had to let it get leather hard so that it would have structure and stability, but now that means that I have to be extra careful with getting all my pieces attached so that they don't come undone. So I am generously scoring and slipping, for example, this coil. And then I'm going to stick this in here nicely. So I've taken that, and now I'm going to blend this in to my wall carefully. Best as I can. Careful holding and cupping the edges because I don't want to lose the shape that I've created on here. And I'm going to give this just an extra scoring for the lid piece. Okay, this is my piece for my lid, and I put it on top of this bowl so it would start to kind of keep this round edge while it was drying before I attached it here. So I'm going to come in here now, and I'm just going to generously score this and add some slip. And then place this like so. And as I'm attaching it here, I'm just making sure that it keeps a little bit of that roundness that I got from the bowl. It's not too round. I want the top mostly flat, but I do not perfectly flat. And then I am going to go ahead and blend this in for my design. A lot of the teapots that I saw, this piece was not so blended in on the outside. It kind of sat so that it looked like a lid. But I want mine smooth. I only want this part to be removable and noticeable for the design that I have. So I am taking, at the same time, I'm smoothing this coil that I used on the inside as I push this on the outside. And also just trying to keep everything supported. That's definitely been, for me, as I've been trying to build things with more form from slabs, the most difficult thing for me has been getting an even form all the way around so it's not like lopsided, so everything's rounded and even. So the teapot is definitely the most challenging with that. Alright, so so I have attached this piece, and you saw I just took a brayer because I didn't have one that was specifically made for clay, but it worked fine to round this edge out because I wanted it to match the bottom. And then I just re-added some of the texture. Again, the texture is not real specific because it's just background for the sculpture pieces that are going to go on top of this to make it look more like a coral reef. So the next things to do are to make sure that the lid will sit inside correctly. You do that similar to the way that I did my pot lid last week or 2 weeks ago. And then on the bottom I'll add a foot piece that's just simply a round slab circle. Alright, so my teapot, my giant teapot here, has been sitting all night, so it's getting nice and leather hard again after all the work that was done to it. So I've also made my lid here. I'll add a handle to it. It's going to be an octopus tentacle that can be held kind of like a mixture between a handle and a knob here. I haven't done the handle because it's also going to be an octopus tentacle that I'm going to be sculpting, and I'll show that in another video because I'm going to do all the decorative parts in the next video. So the only thing left for me to do right now is to add my spout, and I've already trimmed it at the right angle and decided where it's placed, and I've marked the center here with a hole so that I know where it's going to go. So now what I'm going to do is make some holes, and then I'm going to add an extra little coil here to help me get it blended in. And add the spout. So once the spout's on, I'll go ahead and I'll show a video of what that looks like, and then that'll be the end of this video, and in the next video I'll show adding the handle and the kind of the knob handle for the lid as well, and I'm going to also add a tentacle wrapped around here, and then around the body will have some different coral reef elements. Alright, so I have 5 holes. I'm going to check the placement. Making a few more holes to mark placement to make sure that I have my holes where I want them. So it looks like I have room for a few more. And just smoothing the surfaces on both ends to make sure there's no little flakes that are going to be blocking any of the holes. Using this tool, it has a curve to it, so I can just stick it in and rotate it to make the hole. So now I have all my holes, and I'm going to use a coil here. Score and slip, add the coil, and then score and slip and add the spout, and the coil will just help me make sure I fill in any of the seams on there. I don't know if you can tell, but this has a slope and angle to it to help it fit the shape of the teapot, the rounded teapot, and making sure that it is up to make sure that it won't drip if there's hot liquid added, because I do want it to be functional. Even though it's somewhat large for a teapot, I still want it to be able to be used if someone chose to. Alright, so you can see that coil is just kind of like marking the edges of it, and that's going to just help me get everything blended in together. So before I do that, I want to make sure that I've put it on straight, so I'm looking at it from different angles and making sure it's even, pointing at the right angle, that I've attached it where I plan to before I get that smooth. Add a little more slip here in between the joints, and then I will use this tool here, this rounded edge, to start blending this in. Alright, that's all attached. I'm just going to smooth everything out and make sure the seam is stuck, and then I'm going to let this set for a while, and while it's setting I can start making some tentacles to attach. I'll do the tentacle on top of the lid and for the handle of the teapot first while this is setting, and then the last I'll come around with the tentacle around this spout, and then I'll start adding some of the other details for the coral reef. Alright, so now my teapot has a spout and it is angled up, and that's exactly what I wanted. I can actually look through my spout and see my hole, so I know I've placed it correctly with the help of my coil, and that it is solid and in place, and hopefully by having that coil there and using plenty of scoring and slipping, even though I can't actually smooth the inside of the spout, it will stay where it is as it dries. Alright, that's the end of this video. Everything else will be on the next one that shows the details of sculpting and adding texture and details for the coral reef and the tentacles.